last Friday we showed this film, John, to you and the other relatives. Would you like to tell us what you feel and what the others felt when they watched the film?
Well, watching it for the first time last Friday, the families were very emotional. I think the film was done in a way that was family-centred, but it showed that even after 47 years, that the hurt is still there. It's still as raw as ever been, and the fight for justice is still being carried on to clear our loved ones' names. The fight against the MOD from the very start, when they branded our loved ones, gunmen, gunwomen, that's a hard thing to change, and we need the official version to be corrected, that they were all innocent and civilians in their own area, going about their own business.
And what do you hope that this film might help to achieve?
Well, a film like this, what it can do, it can raise awareness of where we have come from. It can, in a way, it can give the families some kind of console where there is people out there that believe that my father, on the 9th of August, went out to help his brother because he thought his brother and his family were in danger, and he wanted to bring him to the sister's house where it would have been a lot safer from where he lived. I would hope that people will start to believe and say, that's the innocent man.
Well, I have to say that we were very struck by the fantastic investigative journalism that you as families carried out. I mean, you found more than 100 witnesses, you found documents. It was a really impressive piece of journalistic work, but also that we're very grateful to you for the fact that you relived such a terrible tragedy in your life for us. I would like to ask Callum a little bit. Callum, what was it that made you decide to try to make a film about something which happened, you know, decades ago, and which many people had forgotten and others maybe wanted forgotten?
I think, well, actually for people of my generation, because I'm quite old, that period was the most was an incredibly kind of extraordinary period to grow up in. I am actually the son of a Presbyterian minister from Scotland, and I grew up in an orange village, basically. And so when suddenly this war was happening on our doorsteps, I'd just gone to art college in 1971, actually, when the massacre happened. And I didn't even know about it then. But for us, that was an incredibly kind of formative period. It was a period when we had to think about, you know, the politics of the situation, of where we stood in relation to this war that was going on. So it's always been an issue that's very much was part of my growing up, even from a distance. And so, but in terms of this particular incident, I think I was actually in Belfast showing my last film at the Human Rights Film Festival, my last film about the war in Sri Lanka, No Fire Zone. And it was then that I heard about what had happened at the Ballymurphy massacre, and I met John actually 3 years ago. And the more I looked into it and the more I found out about it, the more, you know, astonished I was. And the more I felt that, you know, we'd just made No Fire Zone, which had quite an international impact in terms of making people aware of what had happened at the end of the war in Sri Lanka. And I thought, well, look, this is something that happened in my own country. That this is what I should be making the next film about, and it took a long time. It took a long time, and John and I have become friends over 3 years of this. But it's, you know, it's good to see it finally made.
And what were the challenges of making what is essentially a journalistic investigation and a feature documentary as well?
I mean, that's actually a very interesting question, because my background actually came from journalism. into making television programs and then into making feature documentaries. And there's actually an awful lot of people making feature documentaries who are now moving into journalism, as it were, and it's very interesting to understand the mechanics of how you make these two genres work. I do think that they work incredibly well together, and I do think that in many ways this is, certainly part of the future of journalism. But I mean, it's a very different thing when you've got, a long period to make. You have to, and you're making a feature documentary. Well, I mean, there's very good things about it, which is that people aren't as soon as there's an advert break, or as soon as there's a bit which you need to know to understand what happens next, they don't go and make a cup of tea, because you're sitting in an audience and you're watching it. But you have to do much more. I mean, for example, my aims with this film, I had a number of problems. First of all, I didn't want everyone to meet people like John and Briege and all these people as victims, because in television you have to do a bit of a shortcut. And I wanted to sort of meet John and Briege and Rita and all these people as people living in Ballymurphy, and kind of get to know them and feel they related to them as people. And only then would it emerge that they'd suffered this terrible tragedy. But also, I mean, there was other problems, which was that, one of the reasons that nobody knows about this is because it wasn't filmed. So, as soon as I started thinking about how am I going to tell this story, what I've got to do is I've got to show what happened. I've got to show exactly what happened. Can't sanitize it, don't want to sanitize it. But equally, I was conscious all the way through making the film that in a way the first audience that were ever going to see it was 120 families, members, who saw it 3 days ago in that church hall, actually, in Corpus Christi Church. And so from the very beginning, I was thinking, how do I show, somebody's mother, somebody's father being shot dead in cold blood in a way that it illustrates how terrible it was, but isn't kind of gratuitous and sort of disrespectful. And that was where we came up with this sort of device of using, the idea is basically, I suppose, an audience nowadays, we're all very used to seeing drone footage. We tend to be assumed to be on the side of the drone when we see somebody from ISIS running out and being blown up. And I thought, well, but it's always very chilling when you watch that kind of footage on the news. There's something very chilling about it. And I just thought, well, maybe we could sort of reproduce something that looked like what drone footage would have looked like in those days, if there had been such a thing, so that it was forensically accurate. I mean, that was the other thing it had to be actually forensically accurate, because this is evidence of terrible crimes, and we want to show exactly what happened. So it had to be forensically accurate, it had to be respectful, and it still had to get over the horror. And to be honest, I don't know to what extent that worked, but that was how I felt that we could best do that.
Now, I wonder if there are any questions from the audience, if we could put the lights up so that I can see.
Their lights are up, it's just that we can't see.
Oh, really? God. Well, if you've got a question, maybe... Oh, yes, there's a hand up at the back. I'm so sorry, I can't see very well.
Right. My name is Helen Jackson, and I want to congratulate the people who made the film and just say what a right thing and what a brave thing it was for everyone involved to do. And I say that partly because when I was a Member of Parliament, I was Mo Molam's PPS, which meant I was in Belfast an awful lot of the time, talking to people and hearing just the tragedies and the trauma of those years. And it brought back to me the 30 years of the awful troubles, but also the fact that the possibility is there now, more than it ever was, to get the truth. And it wouldn't have been possible without the Good Friday Agreement and the efforts that went in by people from across the spectrum of people to make that happen. So I'm very glad I came. I do congratulate everybody that was part of it and think you're all, it's wonderful. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, any other questions?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah, given that there's powerful forces lobbying for immunity for... That's right, I think my voice is loud enough. Immunity from prosecution for Crown forces operating in Ireland at the time, what do you think the chances are that anybody actually will end up answering for what was done on those 3 days?
Well, can I just ask John, what do you feel about those calls for immunity?
Well, personally myself, I think no one is above the law, and no matter where you were wearing a uniform or you're a civilian, I think everybody should be brought to justice for any acts that was done during the Troubles. The question was also that, do I think there's any chance of getting brought to justice? I would hope it would. The first step is an acknowledgement of what they've done, and that's what the legal case is about, is to bring these soldiers forward, bring the eyewitnesses forward, and just the facts is there. Let's see what the evidence shows us, and if it's found that these soldiers are guilty of murder, guilty of other crimes, and like I said, no one's above the law. We'll let the legal system deal with that.
Thank you.
Can I say something really quickly? Just following up from, in terms of why finding out the truth is so important. I think it's really important that, because we do also get accused of, raising old issues and bringing back hurt. I think the bottom line, which everyone has to always remember, is that the truth is always the first step on the road to justice and peace. And so I think that telling this story, painful as it is an absolutely, it's opening a block on the road or the ongoing road to peace and reconciliation. Which is why we do have to do this. But also picking up on what the last speaker said, I actually, I'm very pleased to say that excuse me, that both James Kinchin-White and Richard Rudkin, the 2 soldiers in the film, are actually here. And I just wondered whether they would like to...
Would either of you like to say something? I know you're sitting next to each other there, because you haven't seen this film before.
No, we have not seen it before. I'd just like to thank John and Callum for being part of the project, really. And I just, I'll carry on helping John and the families in any way I can.
I'd just like to add that as a soldier who served there at the time, it's been an 8-year journey for me to try to extract the truth from the archives and other material. There's an awful lot that hasn't yet been revealed about the early years of Operation Banner, as it was known. And as my colleague here, Richard, said, that if certain things had not happened in those early years, then it would have been an entirely different story, perhaps, that we would be telling. Even with the additional access that I get here and there, it's a struggle. And I do hope, John, that you and all the people who were so badly affected by this get some form of justice, because that apparently is what we were fighting for freedom, democracy, justice. And to deny it to you is to deny the sacrifices everybody made. So I really do genuinely hope that you find the truth and the answers that you're looking for. Thank you.
John, just before you come back, if I could just briefly mention, because I think that what James has spent years investigating. A lot of the documents that you saw, which reveal some of what was going on secretly, were unearthed by James in the Public Records Office, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. John.
Thanks very much, James and Richard. See, when it comes to the search that we've been doing for the truth, it gets to a stage where we meet people like yourselves, and it's, in a way, it's overwhelming, the support, the people who walk the streets of Belfast and the north of Ireland, and who were constantly maybe shot at, and they're to do a job. And I met Richard, and he's like one of my neighbours who would have been next door, just ordinary squaddies who would have come over. But then you have the powers, and the powers were there to do a job. They were ruthless. I can remember growing up as this here happened when I was 11 years of age, and I can remember growing up and the numerous beatings that you would have got for the powers. I seen my friends when we were 13, 14 getting their face bashed off steel doors, getting through on the ground, kicked to the face. And that was a daily life that the powers were doing. And even for yourselves, you were crap hats. No, ordinary soldiers, bar the powers, were crap hats. They had no respect for you or anybody else and other regiments. And this isn't a witch hunt for soldiers in their 70s and things like that. This is a search for truth. This is the search for these soldiers who carried out murders. And some people may say on the streets of Britain, as the North still is at the moment. So what's the difference between the Catholic population over in the north of Ireland and the Catholic population there? It was a war against the Catholic populations in the north, and that's what happened. And all we want is the truth. It's not a witch hunt, but if there's a crime committed, they should be brought accountable.
Thank you, John. Now, I think we've still got time for another question. Yes, here.
Yeah, so I've very much enjoyed the documentary film and the immense work and the courage of the families who spoke and did so much, obviously in terms of their sustained campaign over so many years. So I wish them well in terms of the future inquest later this year. Just a quick question in terms of the helpfulness of loyalist paramilitaries, Billy Hutchinson and others coming forward now and trying to sort of say that they have discovered new evidence about a gunman who was firing in the Ballymurphy area and between the 9th and the 11th of August 1971. Do you regard that as sort of that's very helpful and welcome now in 2018 to come forward with this evidence, or is there some suspicion among the families as to why loyalist paramilitaries have decided to come forward right now?
Any information coming through to shed light of the truth of what happened in Ballymurphy is welcome, but you have to remember from the UVF. The UVF had for many years their aim was to kill innocent civilians, innocent Catholics, draining about in cars, abducting people because they were in Catholic area, murdering them, stabbing them, cutting to pieces. Up until then, you have to remember that in Spring Martin, it was a Protestant estate. The loyalists were brought in lorries. The likes of Billy Hutchinson, people they got who were loyalist paramilitaries in the UVF, they weren't there to help us. They're not out to help us at the moment. Anything that they're doing to muddy the waters. Well, probably I guess 3 months ago, there was an event by the coroners asking for eyewitnesses. It was 600 yards from Spring Martin. There's not one person from Spring Martin come forward. And then 600 yards from it, the coroner asked for witnesses. So what has happened now? We're getting closer to our inquests. The MOD have done all in their power to block us at every level, even to the stage where they can't find soldiers, although the coroner's office can get in touch with HMRC and find out the names of almost all those soldiers. So what this is, it's to muddy the waters, to take some the stain off away what the powers are doing, to put some doubt, and maybe trying to erect what we're trying to do, and we're trying to get the truth. If there is evidence, well, we had to be honest. What has happened is there's somebody has come forward saying this dead man he's never made a statement, and right away they get mixed up by 11 months later from the Spring Hill massacre. So then they changed that there to a loyalist gunman. If you knew all about it, it is laughable, but it's a serious thing that they're trying to scuttled what we're trying to do in the inquest. So there's no help, and I had no faith in what they're bringing forward.
I think if you look at what happened, I mean, what John was saying there, that the first reports, and look at the names, look at the cuttings, the first report they named was a completely different name, and they described an incident, as John said, which happened a year later, and then they changed it to this other incident. But I think there's two things to remember. One is that at that period, people still did not believe that the British Army, most people did not believe that the British Army was capable of doing, or the paratroop regiment were capable of doing what they did. I mean, you heard Briege saying there that her mummy had said to her, the loyalists will shoot you, but the British won't. And so that perception, the assumption in those days, initially was very often that if you were being fired at, it was loyalists. And it was only when the evidence emerged that it became abundantly clear. I mean, we can't rule out the possibility that there was a UVF gunman operating from that wood yard, because both loyalist gunmen and the army were known to alternate. I'm not suggesting necessarily that they arranged it, but that they both operated from that same place. And so, it's not, you can't rule it out, but I think John is absolutely right. It was an attempt to muddy the waters.
Thanks very much. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we'll be outside carrying on this conversation, and I'm very grateful to people who chose to spend a lovely evening here listening to this. But I think this is such an important film, and I congratulate and thank Callum, but particularly you, John, and the families for all the help. And I hope that you feel that the trust that you put in us, we will be merited and will help to bring justice for you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.